The afternoon had unraveled slowly, the way exhausting days always do. Not all at once, but in small, quiet surrenders. Clara stood in the middle of the nursery, her back aching from hours of carrying Noah against her chest, her eyes burning from the kind of tiredness that sleep alone couldn't fix anymore. The curtains were drawn against the late sun, casting the room in a warm amber glow that felt almost ironic, given how frayed everything inside her had become. The white rocking chair in the corner sat empty, waiting. She hadn't sat down in what felt like forever. Noah had been crying since noon. Not the sharp, urgent cry that signals hunger or pain. Those she had learned to read in the first weeks. Those she could answer with something concrete. Something real. This was different. This was the low, relentless whimper that had no clear cause. The kind that made her question everything she thought she knew about being a mother. She had fed him. She had changed him. She had checked his temperature 3 times, pressing her lips gently to his forehead, the way her own mother had done for her, as if a mother's kiss could measure degrees. She had bounced him, swayed him, sung to him in a voice that cracked somewhere in the middle of the second lullaby. Nothing worked. And in the silence between one cry and the next, she heard it. The small, devastating whisper in the back of her mind that she had been trying to outrun for weeks. What if I'm not enough for him? She pressed Noah closer to her chest, not because she had a new strategy, not because she had figured anything out, but because she simply didn't know what else to do. His little body was warm against hers, his heartbeat a rapid, steady flutter beneath the soft cotton of his onesie. She could feel his breath, quick and slightly uneven, the way babies breathe when they've been crying too long and their whole small bodies are still trembling with the effort of it. She closed her eyes and rested her cheek against the top of his head, breathing in the scent of him, baby shampoo and something softer underneath. Something she couldn't name but would have recognized anywhere, in any room, in any darkness. "I know, baby," she whispered. "I know." She didn't know, of course. That was the hardest part. Motherhood, she had discovered in these 4 months since Noah's arrival, was nothing like the version she had imagined during pregnancy. She remembered lying in bed in her 3rd trimester, her hands resting on the enormous curve of her belly, listening to the apartment breathe around her in the small hours of the night. She had imagined something luminous and certain, a love so instinctive, so complete, that it would carry her through every difficult moment on its own current. She had imagined that she would simply know what to do. Nobody had told her about the not knowing. Nobody had described this particular brand of loneliness. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of standing in a room full of love and still feeling lost inside it. She adored Noah with a ferocity that frightened her sometimes, a love so deep it had no floor she could find. And yet here she was, unable to stop his crying, unable to decode the language of his need, standing in the soft amber light of his nursery, and wondering if love alone was enough when you didn't have the answers. Her arms were shaking slightly from the hours of holding him. She noticed it the way you notice things when you've gone past the edge of endurance, distantly, as if it's happening to someone else. She thought about setting him down in the crib, just for a moment, just long enough to stretch her arms and breathe. But the thought of his cry rising, filling the room, filling her chest. She couldn't. She held on. She walked to the window without thinking, a slow, swaying motion that was automatic now, built into her body over months of learning what rhythm calmed him. She pulled the curtain aside with one hand and looked out at the street below. Ordinary life was happening out there. A woman walking a small brown dog, 2 children on bicycles, a man carrying grocery bags up the front steps of the house across the street. All of them moving through their afternoon unaware that here, on the other side of this glass, a mother was quietly coming apart at the seams trying to figure out something as fundamental as why her baby was crying. Noah's whimpering had softened while she walked. Not stopped, but softened, dropped to something lower and less desperate. She kept swaying, slow and steady, watching the street without really seeing it. "I'm right here," she told him. "I'm not going anywhere." She turned away from the window and carried him back toward the rocking chair, lowering herself into it with the careful slowness of someone who has learned not to make sudden movements. The chair groaned softly as she settled her weight into it and began to rock, one hand cradling Noah's head, the other pressed flat against his small back. She could feel every breath he took. She counted them, the way she did sometimes at night when the darkness made her anxious. In and out, steady and alive and here. The crying had stopped. She didn't register it at first. Her mind had been so saturated with the sound of it for so many hours that the absence of it felt like a trick, like something she was imagining out of sheer desperation. But the room was quiet, truly quiet. The only sounds were the faint creak of the rocking chair and the distant murmur of the street below, and the soft rhythm of Noah breathing against her chest. She exhaled, a long, slow breath that seemed to come from somewhere below her lungs, from some deep reserve of herself she hadn't known she was holding. And then she felt it. Noah moved. Not the restless, unhappy squirming of a baby trying to communicate discomfort. This was different. He shifted deliberately, slowly, with the particular intentionality that she had noticed in him these past few weeks. That quality of awareness that made her realize, over and over again, that there was a person in there. A real, conscious, experiencing person, housed in this impossibly small body, learning the world through her. He lifted his head from her chest. She looked down, and he was looking up at her. His eyes, dark and wide and impossibly serious for someone who had only existed in the world for 4 months, were fixed on her face with that focused attention that babies have before they learn to be distracted by everything else. He was seeing her. Not the ceiling, not the light, not the shapes and colors that usually caught his gaze. He was seeing her, specifically her, the way he sometimes did in the middle of the night, when she picked him up in the darkness, and his eyes found her face before anything else. And then his small hand, his right hand, the one with the tiny crescent birthmark on the wrist that she had memorized in the first hours of his life, lifted from where it had been resting against her collarbone, and he placed it, open-palmed and gentle, against her cheek. Clara stopped breathing. His hand was so warm, warmer than she expected somehow, warmer than the room, warmer than the amber light coming through the curtains. His fingers were slightly curved, not quite able to flatten fully the way an older child's would, and they pressed softly against her cheekbone with a touch so gentle it was almost a question. He held it there. He kept looking at her. She felt the tears before she knew she was crying. They came quietly, not in the heaving, desperate way of her hardest nights, but slowly, sliding down her face one after another, and Noah's warm little hand caught one of them, his fingers curving slightly at the contact, as if he was trying to understand what this new thing was. He looked at his hand. He looked back at her face. And then, with the absolute, unbothered certainty of someone who has no idea what a devastating thing he is doing, he smiled. It was not his first smile, that had come 3 weeks ago, a fleeting, lopsided thing that she had immediately called her mother about, whispering into the phone with the urgency of someone reporting a miracle. But this smile was different. This one was aimed. This one was for her, clearly and unmistakably for her, in response to her, in this exact moment of exhausted, tearful, uncertain love. Something in Clara's chest broke open, not in the painful way, not the way things had been breaking these past months, the slow fracturing of her former self making room for this enormous new identity. This was different. This was the kind of breaking open that feels like relief, like release, like the moment a fever finally breaks and you realize the worst is over. It was the feeling of being answered. She lifted her hand and covered Noah's where it rested on her cheek, holding it there, feeling the small bones of his fingers beneath her palm, the pulse of him. She rocked them both in the quiet afternoon, the amber light deepening around them, the rocking chair keeping its soft, steady rhythm. "Is that your apology?" she whispered, laughing and crying at the same time, the way she had learned that mothers do, the way she had watched her own mother do, and never understood until now. "Is that what that was?" Noah gurgled. A small, contented sound, like something settling into place. She pressed her lips to the top of his head and held them there. She thought about the morning, the hope of it, the coffee she would drink while it was still hot, the way the light came through the kitchen window at 7 o'clock and turned everything golden. She thought about all the mornings ahead of them, all the afternoons like this one, all the moments she didn't yet know how to navigate, and all the moments she would figure out, eventually, imperfectly, the way she had been figuring out everything since the first second they placed him in her arms. She thought about the woman she had been before Noah, competent, organized, sure of herself in the careful way of someone who had built her confidence on being prepared. She had made lists. She had read books. She had taken notes in prenatal classes and asked the right questions and believed, with a certainty that felt like armor, that she could learn her way into being a good mother. She smiled now at that woman, with tenderness, without judgment. Because that woman didn't know yet what Clara knew now, that the books don't have the answer to this part. That no amount of preparation can teach you what it feels like to have someone look at you the way Noah was looking at her right now, as if you are the entire world, as if you are the axis everything turns on, as if there is no one else, in all of history, who could possibly do what you do when you hold him. That kind of knowledge doesn't come from reading. It comes from afternoons like this one, long and hard and full of doubt, and then suddenly, without warning, full of this. Noah's eyes were growing heavy. She could see it in the way they drifted and refocused, the long lashes casting small shadows on his cheeks as the light shifted. His hand had relaxed against her face, the fingers loosening, the weight of his arm growing heavier as sleep began to claim him. She didn't move. She barely breathed. She thought, "I will remember this." Not as a thought, as a promise. The kind that forms without language, somewhere deeper than words, in the part of you that keeps the things that matter most. She would remember the amber light and the quiet room, and the rocking chair, and the weight of him against her chest. She would remember his hand on her cheek, and the tear it caught, and the smile that followed. That smile aimed directly at her, the most precise and devastating thing anyone had ever pointed in her direction. She would remember the way this moment answered every question she had carried since the morning he was born. The afternoon settled around them. Outside, the ordinary world continued. Dogs and bicycles and grocery bags and the 1,000 small transactions of people living their lives. And in here, in this warm and quiet room, a mother held her sleeping son and felt the shape of something she hadn't had a word for until now. She had a word for it now. It wasn't a complicated word. It wasn't a new one, but it had a new meaning, a meaning she had earned, hour by hour, night by night, in all the uncertain and exhausted and beautiful days since the first moment he was hers. She held him. She rocked him. She let him sleep. And she understood, finally and completely, that this, all of this, the crying and the not knowing and the doubt and the tiredness and the hand on her cheek and the smile and the tears and the quiet, this was what she had been asking about when she used to wonder what it meant to love someone without limit. She wasn't wondering anymore.